The battlefields of Verdun, the Somme, and Ypres were once the epicenters of some of the bloodiest and most grueling battles in human history. Millions of soldiers fought and died on these hallowed grounds during World War I. But what happened to these battlefields during World War II? How did they fare during the Second Global Conflict? Join us as we explore what happened on these three battlefields of World War I, during World War II, in a journey through time and history. Verdun during World War II. The Battle of Verdun was one of the most infamous battles of World War I, with over 300,000 casualties on both sides. However, what happened to the battlefield of Verdun during World War II is not as well known. While the area was not a major front in World War II, it still played a significant role in the conflict. During World War II, the area around Verdun was initially under German occupation after the fall of France in 1940. The German army established a military base at Douaumont, one of the key sites of the Battle of Verdun in 1916. The French resistance was active in the area, and they carried out a number of attacks against the German occupiers. In 1944, as the Allies began their invasion of France, the Germans fortified the area around Verdun as part of their Atlantic Wall defenses. The Atlantic Wall was a series of fortifications along the coast of Western Europe that the Germans built to deter an Allied invasion. The area around Verdun was seen as a key point in the Atlantic Wall, as it provided a natural barrier against any invasion from the east. The Germans began construction on a number of fortifications around Verdun, including the construction of concrete bunkers, anti-tank obstacles, and minefields. They also established a number of artillery positions in the area, some of which were remnants from World War I. The Germans believed that the fortified area around Verdun would be nearly impregnable to an Allied attack. However, as the Allies advanced through France in the summer of 1944, they broke through the German defenses and began their push towards Germany. The area around Verdun was the site of heavy fighting as the Allies advanced towards the German border. The Germans attempted to hold the area, but they were eventually pushed back. In September 1944, the Americans liberated the area around Verdun. The Germans had destroyed much of the infrastructure in the area as they retreated, and the Americans had to rebuild many of the roads and bridges in the area. The American Army also established a military base at Douaumont, which was the site of heavy fighting during the Battle of Verdun in 1916. After the war, the area around Verdun was heavily mined by both the Germans and the Allies. The French army began clearing the area in 1946, but it was a slow process due to the large number of mines and unexploded ordnance in the area. The French army eventually cleared the area, but many parts of the battlefield remain off-limits due to the presence of unexploded ordnance. The Somme during World War II. The Battle of the Somme was fought between July and November of 1916 during World War I, resulting in over 1 million casualties on both sides. However, the battlefield was not left untouched during World War II. After the First World War, the area around the Somme became a place of pilgrimage for the relatives of the fallen soldiers. The French and British governments also made efforts to preserve the battlefield as a memorial to those who died. However, when in World War II, the Somme once again became a battlefield. During the German invasion of France in 1940, the Somme was located near the front line, and the area saw heavy fighting. The German army advanced quickly through the area, taking control of the towns and villages along the way. In some cases, the Germans destroyed the villages, leaving nothing but rubble in their wake. The battlefield of the Somme was once again a site of death and destruction. The German occupation of the Somme lasted until 1944, when Allied forces began their advance into France. The liberation of the area was not an easy task. The Germans had heavily fortified the region, and the Allies faced significant resistance. The Battle of the Somme in World War II was not on the same scale as the Battle of 1916, but it was no less brutal. One notable event that occurred during the liberation of the Somme was the recapture of the town of Albert. Albert was a strategic location, and the Germans had held it since 1940. The town had been heavily damaged during the fighting, and the famous statue of the Golden Virgin atop the Basilica of Notre Dame de Brebers had been destroyed. The statue was later found buried under rubble, and it was restored and replaced after the war. Another significant event during the liberation of the Somme was the Battle for Montauban. The village had been occupied by the Germans since 1940, and it was a heavily fortified position. The Allies launched a massive assault on the village, with tanks and infantry advancing through the streets. The battle was fierce, with the Germans putting up a strong defense, but eventually, the Allies managed to take the village. After the liberation of the Somme, the area was once again a place of pilgrimage for the relatives of the fallen soldiers. However, the landscape had changed significantly. The heavy fighting and bombing had left many of the towns and villages in ruins. The memorials and cemeteries that had been established after World War I were now joined by new ones dedicated to those who fell during World War II. Ypres during World War II. The battlefield of Ypres played a significant role in World War I, particularly in the First Battle of Ypres, 1914, and the Second Battle of Ypres, 1915. However, the city and its surroundings also experienced considerable fighting during World War II. At the start of World War II, the Belgian city of Ypres was occupied by German forces. The city and its surroundings were strategically important due to their location near the Channel ports and their proximity to the French border. The Germans established a number of defensive positions in the area, including bunkers, trenches, and pillboxes. These fortifications were designed to prevent Allied forces from advancing through the region. In May 1940, the Germans launched an offensive against Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg and France, which resulted in the fall of those countries. Ypres and the surrounding area remained under German control throughout the war, and the city became a base for German troops in the region. Ypres was not an immediate target for Allied forces, but the city and its surroundings became a battleground as Allied troops advanced towards Germany. In August 1944, the Canadian First Army began its advance towards Ypres. The city and its surroundings were heavily defended by German forces, and the Canadian troops faced stiff resistance as they attempted to push through the region. The Canadian forces eventually managed to capture Ypres on September 6, 1944, but not without sustaining significant losses. The battle for Ypres continued in the following weeks and months as Allied forces sought to clear the region of German troops. The city and its surroundings were heavily bombed by Allied aircraft, which destroyed many of the German fortifications in the area. However, the Germans continued to fight fiercely, and Allied casualties remained high. The Battle of the Scheldt, which took place from October to November 1944, was a significant turning point in the campaign for Ypres. The battle was fought by Canadian, British, and Polish troops, and its goal was to secure the Scheldt estuary in order to open up the port of Antwerp for Allied use. The battle was a success, and the Allies were able to secure the estuary and begin using Antwerp as a supply base. After the Battle of the Scheldt, Allied forces were able to focus on clearing the remaining German troops from the Ypres region. The fighting continued into early 1945. But the Germans were eventually driven out of the area. Ypres suffered considerable damage during the war, and many of its historic buildings were destroyed. The city was rebuilt after the war, but it would never regain its pre-war character. In conclusion, the battlefields of Verdun, the Somme, and Ypres witnessed some of the deadliest and most brutal fighting of World War I. Decades later, during World War II, these same areas were once again the site of intense military operations. Today, these historic battlefields stand as powerful reminders of the sacrifices made by soldiers on all sides of the conflicts. Visiting these sites is a chance to pay tribute to the fallen, to reflect on the horrors of war, and to remember the importance of working towards peace. The battlefields of Verdun, the Somme, and Ypres may be tourist attractions today, but they are also a testament to the human cost of war and the need for us to strive for a more peaceful future. Hope you liked the video. See you soon.